Well, hello everybody. It's Dr. Boz, and we are finally live. Sorry about that little late start there. I am happy to bring a really fun follow-up on a couple of stories that I think you'll like and I'll like. I am really excited to see several of the regulars out there watching me. So good to see. Post where you're from. Happy New Year. And it's always nice to know that you can hear and see me. So thank you for that praise. We have an awesome show for you tonight. I have some follow-ups and some really fun updates that I have had lots of you write in and ask about. They're super inspiring. So if you're looking for a little good news and you're looking for some updates on how to stay the course for this year that's only 3 days in, but has some awesome potential for all of us to leave the year better than we started it. I hope that's what you can say when you look back at 2022. And again, great to see all of you checking in from all across the country, actually. I am going to start with a tradition. I did not have a show last week, so that means I did not fast on Christmas. I did start fasting on New Year's Day and am 70 hours into the fast or so, and definitely ready to eat. I'm not 70 hours. I'm 50 some hours in. So I've made it past 2 days. Yeah. Sometimes I forget, I lose track, but we're going to check numbers here tonight. I did start out the morning with some pretty good numbers as far as fasting. I checked them on the way to, as we were just hopping out of the driveway, and my son was holding the glucometer. He held it upside down and told me it was 96. And I'm like, I haven't eaten in 2 days. How could it be 96? And he's like, oh, wait, upside down, 56. All right, got a blood glucose of 61, but ketones is 0.3. That does not surprise me because I definitely had carbs over the holidays. So I am resetting. We're going to talk some about that tonight, about what your numbers may look like. I am pouring some bubble water, and I'm going to have some pucker up in my bubble water. If you haven't checked out what that is my new favorite because there's no sugar in it. And if you've been keto as long as I've been keto, you might recognize that sweetness is not something I like as much anymore. Or when I start, I sometimes don't stop. I sometimes, I just did it again. When you go to pop it, it can end up, I just didn't want to squirt the camera. All right, so there's some pucker up in my water. I will be checking ketones at the end, and let's hope they're a little better, but it wouldn't be the first time since I've started, getting past my fun that I had over holiday weekend or holiday time, that the numbers, when I checked them, I don't even want to look. They're just really low. But the blood sugar is doing well. We're going to talk about that. We have some follow-ups that I am really excited about sharing with you because they inspire me. They are fun to hear about, and there's some mistakes that lots of you are making out there, so we will share how to navigate through that and watch to see what are some of the other lessons that I hope to demonstrate in the year of 2023, but also continue to teach through examples that come my way. So let me do a couple of other announcements while I do this. Actually, let me hold off on that one and say, for those of you that have received my gifts, when you leave a review on my page, and if I read it on the show, I will send you a care package. So I tried doing that in Amazon, but they don't let me have your address. So when you leave a review on my page, it actually has a bigger presence on Amazon, but I've decided for the last couple of months, I've tried to give out gifts for people that leave reviews. So over the month of December, several of you joined me on one of my favorite things, which is the brains course. And I had a really awesome brain review. So Julie actually bought the course of the brains last year. But this is one of those courses where every time I relaunch it and recover it, I ask the veteran students to come share and refresh their minds and their memory. So I just want to read what she said. I took the brains course last year and reviewed it again this year. And I will review it again and again. It has been transformational in changing the direction of my health and my thinking as far as what will help the brain to heal. I've been telling others about it, and I cannot say enough good about this course. I applaud Dr. Boz for her concern and care for men and women in the business and the business model, which shows not only the scientific acumen, but also the personal compassion and a strong faith that she is here on earth for a purpose, sharing this information to help so many of us. Thank you, Dr. Boz. The best part about it is she left a video review, and I have been waiting for the first video review. Julianne gets it, and not only was it a great review and a reminder of why I continue to do that course every December, but I try to do it at least one other time during the year, and it really is. It's helpful for me. It's helpful for all the students that took it. I also want to give you a quick little announcement that I am speaking in person next. Gosh, is it? Yeah, it's next week, right? So if you go to Low Carb USA and you click on events, you'll see that the top one there is January 13th through the 15th. If you are looking for a place to learn keto in a way that gets you continued medical education, whether that's for nursing or counseling or dietitian, or even as a physician or nurse practitioner, you'll get the ability to count this as continued medical education. I just want to show you the rock stars that are on this page of those that are going to be speaking at this event. So even if you cannot attend in person, I would love to meet you. Please come introduce yourself to me if you do get to come in person to Florida. Perfect time of year to do that. But if you're ever want to just take in some of the high level education that I look forward to and I'm excited to share, I actually have a poster presentation that we're going to talk about, that I get to talk about at this, and just finished up some of the details of that in the last day or so. So if you use the promo code DRBOZ, I think you still get a 10% discount. And again, that online participation is only $100, a great education for $100. The second thing I wanted to announce is I am going to be speaking at KetoCon this year. And I just want to point out, this KetoCon is not in the summertime like the other KetoCons have been. It is actually over one of my son's birthdays. So April 21st through the 23rd in Austin. And again, a very powerful event. I really love the woman who leads this and just her leadership in the world of keto, the presence that she has provided for so many newcomers to keto, but also the legends that have been around a while and are attracted to really getting their messages out there. I will be speaking at both of those events. So if you're looking for some places on the calendar, those are some matchups that I have to talk about. But I really want to take the time to also state that this next month has been something I've been counting down for. So I would love to see you in person if you're looking for a support group here in Tampa. I still lead that support group every Tuesday. I did not miss a Tuesday over the holiday season. Even though I missed a live, I still held the support group every Tuesday. So 4809 North Armenia, there's a bowling alley called the Pin Chasers, and I am there every Tuesday from 8 to 9:15. And one of the stories from today is a follow-up of what's going on with a patient that's given a gift that keeps on giving, one that keeps teaching through his example of how he went keto and what is it that he's doing right and what he's been struggling with and how we can compare that to another really awesome story. So let's get into it. Again, as I go through this, if you have questions about the stuff that I'm talking about, please type it in the chat. My team takes those questions and we will talk about them at the end. I'll answer your questions. It's really the only place that I can thoroughly answer your questions is here on the show, and hopefully it's through some of the slides that we talk about, but also gives a better understanding of how to get through some of the hiccups in the ketogenic diet. All right, so let's go to, I want to go to here. All right, so we have a story that I first brought to your attention with, it was probably in, let's see, I think it was September, October. And this is the bigger picture of the story. Let me just kind of give you a background. This is the live. If you look in the show notes, you'll see the live link to the dementia that was reversed. So when I was speaking at KetoCon this past summer, I happened to share the stage for probably the fourth time with Chris Palmer. And we had never really exchanged a way to communicate afterwards. And if you've seen the busyness of a place like KetoCon, it is not the place for two colleagues to try and introduce one another. And so I said, let's, there's a few things that I would like to share with you, and just wonder if you've ever seen this. I knew he was writing a book, so if you're looking for a good read, also in the show notes, you'll see a book called Brain Energy. Chris just published that, and really, I didn't get a chance to listen and read audiobook and some of the Kindle book until the Christmas holiday. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I actually texted him and said, you know that statement where the emperor has no clothes? You've been saying this stuff. You feel like you're the only one saying this. Isn't it obvious that some of this brain fuel is why antidepressants don't really make patients better? They have these tiny little places they move the needle. It is truly in the energy and the metabolism of the brain that changes it. And reading his book just felt like this affirmation that you're not the only one telling the world that the emperor has no clothes. So really love the book, really love to see him put into words what I've been seeing in my practice, what he outlined in his book and also in several case studies, and would love to see if you agree. You can check the book out. So at that conference, though, I introduced this Down syndrome patient who has a remarkable story, and as I'm telling him the story, he encouraged me to write it up for a case study. And I said, I'm not doing that unless you do it with me, because it's been a long time since I've written a case study. And he said, done. So we put together this case, and he kind of helped keep me out of the ditch as far as how to get it delivered to the editors. And we didn't know if our case would get selected for the publication, and we didn't know if we'd ever get through the editing process once we did get selected. And we have finally, in the recent days, been approved for publication. So this case I'm about to tell you is summarized much more succinctly in a publication that's coming out, and we will share that when it does get published. But I wanted to give you some follow-up on this case and just use it as it's a great teachable moment, but also it's a pretty remarkable headline. Dementia is reversible. And this case teaches about what that was all about. So let me show you that. All right, so here's this overall. You can come back and look at that slowly, but I'm gonna take this patient who was, I think, 44 years old when, let's see if I can make this pen work. Oh, my pen's not gonna work. Let's see if I can try that again. Let's see. Well, I'm not going to get to write on my iPad, my slides today. So let's start by looking at, here is this patient's success. She's 44 years old when this story starts in 2014. She was 216 pounds, and I think I've said it out loud. She had Down syndrome. She has Down syndrome. So trisomy 21, which means her from birth has a set of genetics that does not match the full sets of chromosome that most of us have. As a result, Down syndrome have a have a common problem where their brains age faster. They end up with Alzheimer's and disorders of aging, chronic disorders of aging, faster than the rest of us do. So she had, has a body mass index of 46. That's very obese. And in 2014, her doctor says she really does need to lose weight. So her mom put her on a low carb diet. 100 carbs per day is what she began on. They called it paleo. And the only symptom she had at that time was that she had she had obesity, the only symptom she had at the time was gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD. So she had heartburn. Mom puts her on a low carb diet, and I want you to notice on this slide, I wish I could draw on it, I'm sorry that's not happening tonight, that she loses the weight and then plateaus. And she loses the weight and then plateaus. And that's actually normal. That's how there's something extra special happening during the times when she is plateauing. And we're going to talk about that over this week and next week. But she gets to that first 30, 25 pound weight loss. And in the chart of her medical chart, she documents some of the first signs of memory loss. And the family starts to say, geez, it's 2016. She's 40 now, like 46 years old, and having memory problems. And that's just frightening. That's just a difficult place for anybody to see that, but to have a high needs child and then have their memories start to go at such a young age, not uncommon with this syndrome, but very, it's like a grieving process that their child is struggling. So another year goes by, and by the end of the year, her memory problems are bad enough that she gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia. Again, very common in Down syndrome, and they started the medications to try and preserve her memory. She was down to 156 pounds by this point. Mom had stayed only on low carb. They'd now been doing it for 3 years and had these times where she lost weight and then plateaued, then lost weight and then plateaued. And so 2017, 2018, 2019, and now we're in 2020. She's lost a few more pounds, down to 116 pounds. So that is 100-pound weight loss over the course of 6 years. But on a low-carb diet, she was able to get the weight off. But her memory was actually getting worse. She had been evaluated by now a memory care place in January of 2021, and the diagnosis of absence seizures were diagnosed, where she was losing continence, losing control of her bladder, and having these times where she would stare off into space. And this became worked up by the care team, and they diagnosed her with seizures. So now she has Alzheimer's, she has seizures, she has Down syndrome, and the care team is exhausted. So they said, we need help, and they put her in adult daycare. At that time, they lowered the carbohydrates in 2021 to a more strict low carbohydrate diet. And because of that, she lost a few more pounds. So now she's down into that 115, 116 range. But despite all of that weight loss and all of the other health benefits that were happening because she was low carb, she did not have any improvement in her memory. So this score, that ADCS/ADL, is what was her score in how well she could manage her life and her like answering the telephone, picking out food, getting her clothes on, taking a bath. So that score should be north of 60, and hers was now 34. That is severely having severe memory problems, clearly in the dementia zone, and needing full-time care. January of 2022 happens, and the mother drives 2 hours to my little support group, and she is been keto, but and had some great success over that past year, but didn't really want to restrict her daughter's diet because her daughter loves food. And if you've ever been around Down syndrome folks, I think that's like part of the profile. They love food. Their pleasure from food is incredible, and this is no exception. But she asked, after 2 or 3 weeks of coming to the support group, would it be safe for her daughter to be on a ketogenic diet? And I said, oh, absolutely. But if you're looking to do this for memory problems, you must document is she making ketones? So she followed the rules, got the meters out, and her and her daughter now were documenting a state of ketosis starting in January. I want you to notice that from January to March, she loses another 10 or 12 pounds. And during that time, within 2 weeks of starting that further weight loss, that ketogenic state, she had her return of continence. She now could control her bladder. Her seizures stopped. The seizure medications were reversed. By March, she had gone back into the doctor and said, I don't think we need these dementia medications. I don't think, I can't believe how much more social she is. And I love the one story that the mother talked about was she was very good at 2-syllable words, but a 3-syllable word isn't something she'd ever heard her daughter say. And at somewhere between late February and early March, she had said something to her daughter and said, do you understand? And her daughter replied, yes, I understand. And it was very heartwarming to watch the mother tell the story, because never in 47 years or 46 years had she heard her daughter use a 3-syllable word. Several other things got better, where her social isolation, because she was fearful of the world around her, that barrier went away. She'd become so obsessed with certain things being very correct that she was down to wearing one outfit, because that was the only thing that met all the criteria for her obsessions. Now at the end of March, or at the beginning of March, she was back to a full wardrobe. She was able to walk the dog and not get lost, and really was able to return back to her baseline, which is that ADL score at the end, or at the end of that 8 weeks. So at the beginning of March, was back to what her baseline was. And during that time, I just have a report. I asked the mom in group today. Again, mom comes to this group on Tuesday mornings. She drives 2 hours to be at a support group at 8 o'clock in the morning. And she says, I do it because it is so helpful to get my questions answered, but to also have this support group of other people that are doing what I want to keep doing, and that what I know is the best for my daughter. So as we wrote this case up, we much more succinctly outlined that memory problem that we say is reversible, is very documentable in this 8-week transition from the beginning of her, we're going to do keto, measuring the ketones, was using low carb before this, but was not in a state of ketosis. And once she was pushed to the total carbohydrates of 20 or less, her memory problems improved, her social problems improved. And if you read this book, Brain Energy by Chris Palmer, you're going to see that, yes, her brain fuel changed. And so I asked today, how is she? How's she doing? And she said, it's almost emotional to talk about how much freedom their family has. In this past year, they took an RV trip, which they would have never done before, because the daughter couldn't handle it. The change was too much anxiety. She would get too frustrated, too difficult to manage. And especially when she was 15 pounds heavier, it was difficult. If she got mad, people could get hurt. Now, she says, one of the best parts is that her memory was so bad during the hard parts of that transition, of those years where it was failing, that they couldn't use rewards or consequences to help change a behavior. She couldn't remember the rewards. She couldn't remember the consequences. And then several other things got harder. She was socially isolating. She couldn't be around people. She couldn't be left at daycare sometimes, just because she needed to be in a place that was very safe for her. She just couldn't cope with it. So when I last heard about this, when we started writing up this paper, it was probably September. And she was like, yeah, she's still doing great. She's kept the weight off. She's really doing wonderful. And so I said, well, since October, how's she doing? And the mom reported today that even better improvement in her social skills, to the point where this happened. Susie got to be part of the Christmas pageant that their church puts on for children with disabilities. And I don't know if you can see her there in both pictures. She's one of the angels, but Susie was also in charge of chaperoning one of the other females with Down syndrome that's standing next to her. Not only was she able to stand on stage, say her lines, be part of this Christmas pageant, but she was also able to comfort someone next to her, a skill that was completely absent from her Rolodex of options a year ago. So as we start 2023, I just want to show you what can happen in 1 year of somebody being in ketosis, being steadily in ketosis, and then watching what that impact does, not only to her family, but to her freedom, her ability to be. Mom says one of the best parts about having an obsessive part of her Down syndrome is I leave her at home to take care of several of the cleaning issues, and I come home and they're done. So Mom is happy to report that, yes, she's back to doing those things that Susie actually gets pleasure from, which is cleaning and being part of these social activities that she and her mom and her family have really had an imprint in that community for helping others. So this is one case where we're going to come back, and I want you to at least remember how she lost weight. She lost weight rather quickly, and then she held that plateau, and then she lost weight, and then she held that plateau. And if you didn't recognize that, watch that in the replay here if you need to. So the next thing I want to talk about is another person who's come to support group, and his name is Joel. And I keep saying Joel's the gift that keeps on giving. He shows up in November, and in November he had not done keto. He had found keto like a week and a half ago, and him and his wife are in an RV as well, and they landed in Tampa and said, we're going to go to the support group. We're only going to be in the area for about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, and then they'll move to a different part of the country. But as they're here, they've been coming, I think, almost every Tuesday, since they've been parked in the Tampa area. All right, so when Joel presents, he comes from a life of abundant carbs, a life that had some alcohol in it, maybe like 10 drinks a week or so. Also a life that had some high blood pressure and a pretty lean. I guessed on his height by, I'd say 5'8" or so, 5'7", and has he's not overweight. I'm meeting him. I met him for the first time when he was, I think, 2 or 3 weeks into the ketogenic diet. And so I'm going to show you his slides because it is a different problem that we're going to unpack together. So first of all, he starts out at 188 pounds. He loses 22 pounds in one month. And over the course of the second month, he's lost a couple more pounds. So that weight problem has dramatically changed. But the second thing he did was his carb intake went from the high 200s, high hundreds at least, down to 20 total carbs or less. I think he might have even been 0 carb. But he went from plenty of carbs to a time where he didn't have any. And then a couple of, we're going to talk about what happened over the last week in just a second. His eating window is another thing where it went from several hours a day, like a normal 12 hours a day, he eats in the morning, eats at night. And then he went down to eating 1 meal a day in 15 minutes because that's all it took to eat, he said. And then he came and presented actually to the support group saying, I feel terrible. I feel awful. And the first thing we talked about was you need to open up that eating window. You cannot put all that fat in 15 minutes and expect it to do anything except he had amazing weight loss. His blood pressure dropped. He was able to get off the medications for his blood pressure even because he could hardly stand up, but he felt terrible. The other thing that he gave up because there were carbs in it was he stopped the alcohol. And I just want you to notice what happened at the end of this. I wonder if I can blow that up. Maybe. This one I can blow up? I'm going to do that. Close. Yeah, there we go. So here's what happened over that Christmas holiday. Is that, so first of all, if you go back and you watch, I put this in the show notes, that the link to watch the full explanation of what Joel was struggling with. And several people in the notes says, Doc, he did everything right. What did he do wrong? He said he was perfect. And I must not have done a very good job of explaining that, yes, he followed the chemistry set perfectly. And he had ketones that were so high that in our support group, if you've got high ketones and people brag about it, you can get some hairy eyebrows from the people like me that have been around the block a while saying, yeah, I don't make ketones like that anymore. I'm in the long game. But when you first show up to a high-fat diet, low-carbohydrate diet, your body will turn on the ability to make ketones. So here he was with ketones of 5.2 or something, blood sugars that were in the hundreds that were now 70. He had gotten off his medications. He'd stopped drinking alcohol. He'd lowered his carbs to 0. He's eating only 15 minutes a day. And several people posted, well, what did he do wrong? And I'm like, oh, you can't see what he did wrong. He did that so fast that his body could not adapt, which brought me to his cholesterol. When I checked his, oh, that's not the right cholesterol panel. Oh, where did I put his cholesterol? Oh, so I'll come back and tell, that's not the right cholesterol panel. We'll come back and talk about that in a second. So his cholesterol, you can go back and look at in the other show, was the perfect cholesterol. It had, the total cholesterol was okay, the triglycerides were low, the HDL was high, there was, I don't know if you checked inflammation on him, but that did not, it was perfect. And 5 weeks into the ketogenic diet, his cholesterol's off the roof. I mean, total cholesterol is like over 300. His LDL cholesterol is like, I don't know, 180 or something. His triglycerides are 3 times higher than they would. His good cholesterol, his healthy cholesterol went down. And I did a whole lecture on what is actually happening here and why, yeah, I know his numbers went all haywire, but that's what happens when you eat. You go from a high carbohydrate state, you eat high fat in 15 minutes, and all of these other things that your body is trying to do not adapt. And when you look back at what he was really struggling with on, let's go to this slide here, on that last week, those last 2 weeks in December is what those little highlights are, is the first thing we talked about was opening up his eating window. Take that eating from a 15-minute eating window and get it back to at least a 5-hour eating window. So he does that within a couple of within about 7 days for sure. He was feeling so much better. He said, I can't believe that before you told me to open up that eating window, I could hardly walk across a big parking lot without feeling fatigued, like I wanted to lay down. Like my blood pressure must be really low, but it wasn't that low. I had no energy. And within 7 days, like I'm out playing pickleball for 2 to 3 hours. I'm winning and I want to go to the gym afterwards. So his energy returned when he opened up that eating window. It's also the time he checked his cholesterol, so he's kind of freaking out that he's going to die because of high cholesterol. And again, we unpacked that in the other video. But what Joel missed and what I tried to explain in that was the opposite of what Susie did. So Susie's mom had her low carb for 4 years before she went keto. Now, I wish she would have had a state of ketosis during the times where she was losing that weight, because I think it would have preserved her brain's shutdown from that memory problem. But if you notice that weight loss that Susie had, she would lose weight and then hold stable, and then lose weight and hold stable. And we're going to talk a lot about this next week, about when you look at people who lose weight and then gain it all back, it has a lot to do with how you manipulate their set points. I'm not going to go into that tonight, but it's a great lecture that we're working on for next week. And Susie did a great job, and Joel can still do a great job. But Susie dropped the weight, held it for a while, and dropped the weight and held it for a while. And y'all call that plateaus. And it really does have to do with the message that Joel skipped. Joel crash landed into 20 total carbohydrates or less, no more alcohol, perfectly following the numbers, ketones that shot off the roof, glucose that dropped down, blood pressure that normalized, and the messages in the background were, what did he do wrong? And what he did wrong was he might have got the chemistry right, meaning he got the ketones high and that glucose lower than it was, but chemistry is really 2 parts. One of them is the fuel you're using in your body. How fast can you deliver glucose? How well can you produce ketones? And how flexible are you at moving back and forth from ketones and glucose? But even when you do pop ketones into a 6.0 or 5.6, I mean, he had amazing ketones. If your endocrine system isn't adapted to use it, you can't sustain it. That's what crashed his energy. That's why he couldn't regulate his blood pressure. His minerals were all going out the south door, meaning he was peeing out his sodium and other electrolytes because of being in a high state of ketosis very quickly without the mechanics and that cellular parts that need to upregulate when you get onto a high-fat diet. Again, Susie did the opposite. Susie spent 4 years learning how to live on a low-carb diet, not increasing her ketones, but really learning how to eat low-carb over those several years. And what was very predictable from the moment Joel told me that story is, I've seen this hundreds of times. What happens to folks that do it Joel's way is they crash land into the ketogenic diet. And then they don't understand why he didn't feel good. And when I told him to open up that eating window, he's looking at me like, why? You told me to go to OMAD. I'm like, no, I did not. Yes, I want your eating window closer. Yes, I want your insulin regulated better. But your body needs time to get that full chemistry set right, which isn't just the fuel, but is the endocrine system that takes weeks to churn at a higher level. And so he plays this forward, and like I said, Joel's the gift that keeps on giving. He shows up at group today and says, oh my gosh, I opened up that eating window. I felt so good. I'm playing pickleball, winning everybody's match, winning matches, playing for 2 or 3 hours, going to the gym afterwards, lifting weights. I am doing great. And then the holidays came, and I had, if you'll notice this slide, let's see if it's there. You'll notice the first thing is that red line went up. He had a drink of alcohol. And again, is alcohol a problem? I don't know. But he had one drink of alcohol, and the next day he had another drink of alcohol, and said, that's not a problem. It was just one drink. It's over the holidays. But the second drink of alcohol came with the return of some carbs, because as soon as your inhibition is down, especially on the ketogenic diet, what happened on the third day is they said, we went to the liquor store. We just bought a bottle. And the carbohydrate consumption, at least planned to go that high. They have a very entertaining story about how they ordered Taco Bell online and it never actually got delivered to I think they were in a hotel instead of the RV that day, it sounded like. And again, if you're reading this book by Chris Palmer, talking about brain fuel, I explain, when you're keto adapted, by now he's 6 weeks into a ketogenic diet, a very extreme transition. And not only were his ketones and glucose regulated before he started that first drink of alcohol, then alcohol plus carbs, and then a crash, which was, I think, 4 days ago. Joel was doing a great job of the rules, but he skipped a few steps. Not only did he skip the endocrine process that he finally caught up to by the end of that 6th week, his endocrine system was working, he was able to support his body and use the fuel in his body and his cells he was able to fuel his body and his cells with fat, deliver it, and really recover from pretty intense workouts at 65 years old. So he's winning. He's doing a lot of things right. And the eating window opened up. As soon as I asked him to open up the eating window, his first comment back to me was, well, okay, but can I fast tomorrow then? I'm like, no, quit going so fast. Your body has to adapt to this. So as his endocrine system adapted, and then he noticed, well, but my ketones went back down. And I'm like, well, that's what keto adaptation looks like, is that you make ketones when you need them and you use glucose when you do. We do a lot of education on that in the 21-day metabolic course, where we talk about what does it look like for the long game for people to flip between two fuels. And when you have cases like Joel's, this is a very common scenario where he crash lands into the perfect rules. But what he skipped over were some of the social lessons needed to adjust and adapt when he gets tempted. So he crash lands on Christmas Day into going to the liquor store, and although they didn't buy carbohydrates, they bought alcohol with some sugar in it and had several drinks. I explained today that when you are keto adapted, when your blood pressure's down and you're doing good, your sugars are down, the effect of alcohol on the astrocytes in the brain, on the mitochondria inside the astrocytes in the brain, is 5-to-1, meaning 5 drinks before he was keto is the same impact that 1 drink on keto would have had. So even though he only had 1 drink the first day and then another 1 drink the second day, the third day, his inhibitions of saying, I deserve this. Oh, I am doing so good. I've lost all this weight. My blood pressure's fine. But what happens to Joel next is where the teachable moment comes. So let's go to the next slide. The next one after that. That's the wrong lipid panel. So here's Joel's liver and his muscle cells. I put a mitochondria inside that muscle cell because I want to show you what happened to him when he first, what was happening to his body before he went keto. His body was very dependent on how to use glucose. And there was a memory inside his liver on how much glucose it was going to take to fuel the body for the next 24 hours. And his body has spent the better part of, 10 years practicing how to fuel the body with glucose. Because one of the complaints that Joel had today at group was he came to group and said, I did that like 4 days ago. Why is my blood sugar still high? I haven't had any carbohydrates since that mess we had with going to the alcohol store and having carbs and booze on New Year's Eve. And he goes, how can there still be carbohydrates? How can I still have a glucose of, 85 or something? When before all this happened, before that first drink of alcohol, before that wave of carbohydrates, I had my blood sugars down into the 70s. One stinking little fit, 2 or 3 days, not a lot, just 2 or 3 days of saying, why are my blood sugars still so high? I said, well, as much as you were able to follow the rules and deliver the chemistry, and even in the last 6 weeks, deliver the endocrine system that really matches with an improved metabolism, what you haven't done is switch over all of the cellular parts within your liver and your muscles to store glucose. So here we are. Here's what his liver looked like before he went keto. It had lots of glucose storage there. And then you look at what his liver or what his muscle cells had, which is a whole bunch of glucose right next to the mitochondria, or those powerhouses in his muscle cells. Throughout his muscles and his liver, he stores lots of areas where sugar is readily available for his body, and it's got a memory. He has been using a very similar amount of glucose every day for the better part of over a decade, whatever he's been, probably struggling with his high blood pressure problem. And as he went keto, he wiped out that storage because he wasn't filling it as fast, and he lowered his blood pressure because his blood sugar went down. And over the course of the last 6 weeks, he has less storage in his muscle cells and his liver until he eats his carbohydrates. And then the memory of where all of that storage of glucose is from is still there. As soon as he had a high carbohydrate meal, a really high carbohydrate time of 2 or 3 days, his storage filled right back up. And now he is spending the next several days emptying out those glucoses by not having any more glucose. And albeit he will empty his liver faster this time around, he will empty the storage in his muscle cells faster this time around. And more importantly, the place where his liver stores fat is right next to where that mitochondria was. I actually made that go away there. So if you look at those muscle cells, when you look at the distance that the glucose is from mitochondria, it tells you on a biopsy that tells you those people are carb heavy. They're carb loaded. They're the athletes that are fueled by carbohydrates. When they do what Joel did, which was go on a ketogenic diet, and then he's exercising on a ketogenic diet. Good job. He's emptying his glucose storages. He is learning to adapt and force that mitochondria to live off of a fat-based fuel more often. And unfortunately, if he did that forever, no problem. But as soon as he fell off the wagon, which was the predictable part about the profile of what happened with the case of the Down syndrome patient versus Joel. Joel crash landed into a change, and although he came to group when we swept him out of the ditch and got him back on the straight and narrow, the goal for Joel is at the end of 2023, I hope he's still keto. I hope he's able to say, find the eating window that fits with your life, not one that crashes you so tight, so hard that when you do have that first drink of alcohol, it makes you want to have another drink of alcohol, and then it makes you want to crave carbohydrates, because that syndrome is common. I see that over and over and over again. They give up the alcohol, they give up the carbs, and then they don't ever think they have much of a problem with alcohol, but one drink of alcohol, which is now as potent as 5 drinks used to be, led to the next day of another drink of alcohol, and then it's alcohol and carbohydrates. And praise God, he said, stop that. I'm going to group in 2 days. I'm going to shape it up because I'm going to be back in front of Dr. Bosworth in 2 days. And that process of improving his metabolism isn't without the subtext that being part of an accountability and a support group coming to see us on Tuesdays really helped him to say, all right, shape it up. Yeah, as much as his wife might have said, okay, we can't do that anymore. Joel also said, oh, not only that, my blood sugars didn't go back down to normal. His blood pressure is back up a little bit. Even just 3 days of adding that alcohol and carbohydrates back, because the cells inside his body are still very used to storing all that glucose. And as soon as he adds that back, especially with only being keto for, 8 weeks, those storage bins will fill right back up. You'll be back on that same pathway of now how do I reset again? So I tell you the story in hopes that you can see there are some amazing advantages to watching cases like Susie's, the Down syndrome patient, who had, she was headed for a destiny that was crippling for her family and isolating for hers. And although she'd gone low carb, she wasn't in a state of ketosis, so she didn't get that brain improvement. And again, I highly encourage you, go to the show notes, click on the Amazon book called Brain Energy, written by Chris Palmer. He's the co-author for the paper that I wrote about this Down syndrome patient, and just a wonderful guy, great teacher, been standing out in front of the physicians and the leaders in psychiatry, and just like I have been for internal medicine, saying the emperor has no clothes. This works way better than our prescriptions did. And the book really unpacks that. And Susie's case is an excellent example of that, of being slow and steady about how she changed her carbs, but did not get the chemistry right. And Joel was the opposite. Joel crash landed into the chemistry shift of glucose and ketones. But he had some serious resets to get his endocrine system really reset. And then the first flub up that he has 6 weeks into the ketogenic diet or 8 weeks into the ketogenic diet, that storage bin of all of his cells, he has not had autophagy. He has not been in this long enough to turn over all the cells that are used to living with a high amount of glucose storage and a high amount of availability of glucose. That's the opposite of a high-fat, low-carb diet. And he was there for 2-3 decades, however long he's been there, to reset all of his cells and not be in that path. Have the ability to have a glass of alcohol or carbohydrates and not relapse completely back into what he was before he landed here in November. That's the other side of the equation. So I give these 2 examples to show you I see these kinds of problems all the time. I see them in my support group. I see them in the clinic. And one of the places that I get to unpack these is in my 21-day metabolic course. I've mentioned this a couple times in the past, but that I wasn't sure I was going to do it again. I really think it would be a sin not to do it again because of how much it changed cases like Joel's, cases like actually Susie's mom, that impact of walking through people's metabolic stories and saying, here's the place where you need to make a change. And I look forward to opening up the course in a week. We're going to start sales on January 11th. It will be closing on January 18th. And anybody who buys a seat before that. It puts the $200 deposit down for a seat to be part of the program ahead of time. You get to choose your coach, and you also get to choose your time slot before the rest of the students. Again, I really thought I would make the choice to see patients in the clinic one at a time. And after I saw how powerful the impact was for the 200 plus students to be in a cohort of people, in a class where 3 weeks of intense shift of moving their metabolism and then watching them plateau and then moving their metabolism and watching them plateau. That's what we're going to be teaching about over the next couple of weeks. We're going to talk about set points and how important it was that what Susie was really doing, that I do not think Susie's going to gain her weight back, that if we can help Joel get through the next couple of months, I don't think he'll gain his weight back, but it's in the details of what are they doing about how they lose the weight and what happens during a plateau. So I'll unpack those in the next couple of weeks on our lives, and I look forward to anybody pushing the sign-up buttons for our 21-day metabolic course. It is not meant for the faint of heart. If you're not committed, it's probably not the course for you. It is 21 intense days of changing your metabolism and then watching what happens over the next several months once you've done that. So I am going to get to our questions. We do have a couple of them here tonight, and wanted to make sure I did quickly mention again that the two places I am speaking over the next couple of months. Next week is Low Carb USA. Make sure I said that. Oh yeah, I'm speaking at KetoCon. Here's that one, KetoCon here in Austin, and here is Low Carb Boca next week. I would love to see you guys there using your promo code DRBOZ if you want to get a little bit of a discount. But most importantly, I hope you come, and I hope you you introduce yourself to me. All right, so Russell writes in today and says, what is the journal where the case study will be published? It is called Frontiers, and they haven't given us a release date yet. We just know that we were selected as one of the cases that, again, they were case studies about what the ketogenic diet is showing in so many cases. So I honestly didn't think we'd get selected because there's a lot of really cool cases. So I'm thankful, but it's called Frontiers in Psychiatry, I think is what this one is called. It's Frontiers, but then they have Frontiers in different types and Frontiers in Psychiatry. When it's published, I will share it here as well. All right. Capri writes in and says, my 59-year-old, or excuse me, my 5'9" husband, 65 years old, has dropped to 148 pounds. Surprisingly, still a bit of visible fat, doing 16-8 for prevention of other health issues, sleep apnea, and not sure what that word is. How can we get him to add muscle? Okay, so that is a great question. I'm going to come back over here while I answer that. The muscle mass is to do what Joel was doing, but did it way too fast, way too quick. And that is he was exercising in a ketogenic state. So one of the places where muscle building does, first of all, 65-year-old male, I would have his doctor check his testosterone level, make sure that is good. Once they're keto adapted, they've lost a bunch of weight. You just want to make sure that they are not testosterone depleted. I have found an overwhelming, massive amount of my males that had obesity, lost the weight with a ketogenic diet, had their testosterone normalized. And so I wouldn't expect it to be abnormal, but it's something still you should check. And then to look at how do you get him to add muscle, you want ketones to be present. So in the state of a ketogenic state, in the keto chemistry, that muscle building is by, I know this sounds crude, but it's by tearing muscle and repairing it. The best part about what Joel was doing is he was going to play pickleball for 2 hours a day. So that's using his muscle. And then he was going to the gym and lifting weights. So that's for sure where he was tearing muscle. I don't expect him to do that, but I do expect him to grow muscle because of the removal of inflammation in the state of ketosis, and those high ketones prevent that body from using ketones as a fuel source. The ketones prevent the body from using muscle as a fuel source. And that really is one of the best ways to prevent the muscle wasting at 65 years old. When people are losing weight and they say, but I just don't want to lose any muscle, keeping the ketones present is how you do that. It is a protective message that makes the body preferentially select the fat to be the source of energy, not the muscles. So if that 65-year-old husband is like a lot of patients, they lose the weight, they get down to a pretty good body weight, but their state of ketosis is not always there. I mean, ways to fix that are to supplement with ketones, or to add fasting in regularly. At the beginning of the show, actually I'll check my ketones while I'm telling the rest of the story. My ketones were 0.3. This morning, my ketones were 0.5. Now, this morning, my blood glucose was 65. And today, what was it, 61 or something? So I know that I'm making ketones to supply just enough. But I haven't worked out in a couple weeks. Probably I didn't work out since before Christmas, I don't think. I haven't worked out since before Christmas. So I haven't been pushing my muscles to use more. I didn't fast last week, and I usually do. So I've got a couple of places where I didn't push the stress inside my system to ask my body to produce more ketones. And so I would highly encourage him to be checking his ketones. If you're saying, I just don't want to lose any more muscle, well, then make sure you are in ketosis. Just like what Susie ended up with, this really impressive improvement in her psychology, improvement in her mental health, because the ketones have been around. That is the critical step, that her diet is kept with 20 total carbohydrates and high fat. And by golly, she loves it. She loves not just the stuff her mom makes, but that it's a high fat, satisfying food that she doesn't spend as much time obsessing for anymore. So I'm going to check my numbers at the end of the hour here. And we'll do another question. Let's go over to that question here. All right, next one is, I just completed a 36-hour fast, and the highest my ketones came to was 0.9. Well, that's a good stress. I broke my fast with bone broth and lean turkey. My ketones are back down to 0.4. Any recommendations? Well, I'll show you. I'll show you a good question. Go to here. So here are my numbers. I've got a glucose of 46. Yes, of 46. I have ketones of 0.4. Okay. Over the course of the last hour, I bet if I would check them again, they'd be a little bit higher. I added ketones. I supplemented ketones. I got my ketones to go a little bit higher. I feel really good. I know that my body's producing ketones, but I've been without a stress to my system for a while. So one of the places where people are saying, yes, I've added this fast, I'm doing pretty good. I will tell you that 36 hours of fasting clearly stressed your system. Your ketones went up. But if you're really looking for the surge in ketones, the really enhanced metabolism, yes, you can supplement with ketones, but you can also add heat, which is a sauna. You can add an exercise, which is a very good way to improve the ketones. And you'll be able to measure it. I mean, that is the key thing here. The guy who's looking at increasing his muscle mass, same question here, saying, why are my ketones so low? The beauty of this diet is you're not guessing. You are measuring ketones. I see somebody over here said, what happened to FORACARE? FORACARE is still a very good meter, especially if you want to be able to check that uric acid. And they now you can check total cholesterol, which is one way or another. But I will tell you, one of the powerful improvements that I have in monitoring patients has been with the Mojo's synchronized dashboard amongst the groups of people. And truly, when I first went to pick a meter, the difference between Keto Mojo and Keto FORACARE was a lot, and I think FORACARE was doing a better job. And over the course of the last 6 years, Mojo has done some incredible improvements in how their strips are made, how much cheaper their strips have come down, and the technology they have in synchronizing data Our 21-day course uses this system so that everybody in the group can see the synchronization of everybody else's numbers when they check in. And if you want to see accountability, that is incredible. We call it positive peer pressure. Not my word, it is true, but that positive peer pressure gets a team of people to say, well, if I look at this question, if she was in the 21-day course, let's go over here. If she was in the 21-day course and said, well, why are my ketones doing this? I would say, I need you to keep fasting and watch to see what happens over the next 12 hours. And her improvement in the glucose or in the ketones and the drop in the glucose would happen over the next 12 hours. The other things that she could do to drop those numbers and improve that metabolism would be to push her system, to go for a run, go for a walk that makes you sweat, hop into a sauna. And not only would she be able to see those numbers, but everybody synchronized to the group that we put her in would be able to see them too. And if you want to see a positive motivator for people to change and do something that she might never do if she's the only one looking, but I guarantee she would do it if she was in competition with the other folks inside her support group. The last question has to do with gut biome and mental health. There's actually a whole chapter about that in Chris's book. So in Dr. Palmer's book, I would highly encourage you to read that. I won't recap it for him and steal the punchline, but I do want you to know that we will be putting a video at the end of this show that's called an end screen, and YouTube really cares about end screens. So if you're watching this on replay, please click the end screen. But you might want to do it because the video is pretty good. It's based on fat-based hormones and how well those change and how important that is in that endocrine system that I was talking about that Joel was skipping. He was getting the glucose and ketones right, but because he went so fast, the part that he left behind were those fat-based hormones. All right, folks, we will see you next week. Thanks for tuning in, and I will continue to reverse medical problems with this healthy keto